is diplomacy still alive? Is it an option?
Well, I mean, it makes me remember when Churchill said, like, you know, there are situations like, for instance, dealing with Russia. He said it's like a riddle wrapped in a mystery inside an enigma. So what we are in right now is an uncharted territory within an uncharted territory within an uncharted territory. Let's not forget, just 2 weeks ago, people were looking forward to the 6th round of talks, nuclear talks between the United States and U.S. Some reports suggest a framework agreement was on the table, meaning maybe Iran will freeze
You
some
mean
of
the Iran and the U.S.?
Yes,
Yeah.
I'm talking about the Steve Witkoff, the special representative for Donald Trump, and the Iranian Foreign Minister Araghchi. There was an expectation that the 6th round would move forward, and 2 days before, suddenly you have this attack. One side says it's for self-defense, the other side says it's an unprovoked. The reality is that in itself was a big shock. And then you have Donald Trump. Initially, the Trump administration distances itself, says this is unilateral, we have nothing to do with it. They took out their troops and forces from the area to make sure they don't get involved. And then a few days later, Donald Trump basically owns it, co-owns it. And next thing you know, he says, okay, I'll give this another ultimatum of 2 weeks more for diplomacy. And then 2 days in, you have this attack. As we speak, we still don't know exactly what that attack achieved. Some would say the impact is decisive. I was just looking at the updates by the IEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. It may suggest that there might be some impact. There are others who are saying this is just for the gram, that maybe it made a lot of splash, but maybe not. And then there are others saying that actually something else that could have happened here is that maybe there was some sort of signaling. So maybe the Iranians had actually took out already the highly enriched uranium. And now, and I think Pete Hegseth, the chief of Pentagon, I think he admitted a while ago that they now cannot really track what's going on. So actually, we are moving into a very dangerous situation because on one hand, it is very possible that Iran may not officially withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty, but de facto be in a gray zone, whereby you don't know what's happening to that enriched uranium. And then the other one is, as we speak, I think everyone is rushing to get their, their tanks full because the price is going to go up. But that's even without the worst-case scenario. And the worst-case scenario is that what if there is a military action or mining of the Hormuz Strait, which is a very narrow strait, which more or less Iran is a dominant power.
Iran has done that before.
This is during the Iran-Iraq war.
They put aqua mines under.
Yes, and you had the tanker wars and horrible situation. U.S. got involved military back in the day, so there's a fear we might go in that direction. We have not yet, because there is still room for de-escalation, right?
Yes, how?
So one
how
thing
can we
is,
bring these people to the table and talk?
well, I think for the Iranians, they don't want to get into a two-front war. As we speak, there's tit for tat between Tel Aviv and Tehran. Civilian casualties going up. It's a very depressing situation. At the same time, the Iranians, I don't think they want to pick a two-front war, including with a superpower like the United States. So there could be a calibrated escalation whereby Iran will have a response. But from what I understand, the Americans withdraw a lot of troops anyway from a lot of bases in the area as a precautionary measure. So could there be a calibrated symbolic response to make sure this doesn't get out of control, especially if the Iranians were able to take out already highly enriched uranium?
But Richard,
if they strike hard back and there's high casualty on the American side, then we're looking at the multi-front war. Now, China and Russia, I don't think World War III is going to happen anytime soon. But China and Russia may not directly come to Iran's aid. But if this becomes a protracted conflict like the Ukraine conflict, they have an interest to bog down America via Iran, the same way that the NATO supports Ukraine against. Again, these are very different situations from a moral international law standpoint. But from a real politics standpoint, if you look at it in the short run, everyone could be a loser, including us, because of the oil prices.
And our OFWs will be
as the USEC mentioned, we're really worried that this... And remember, like Iran also has another nuclear power plant. This is a civilian nuclear power plant in Bushehr, in the south of the country. There are fears that if that gets targeted, it could create a Chernobyl-style radioactive situation. Then it's really, forget about World War III, it's going to be a radioactive, literal situation in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia.
But who will do that?
So far, there's no attack, because that's a purely civilian plant, and the Russian scientists there. So the stakes are much higher. So when people, I don't know, President Trump, I think, claimed that the program has been obliterated. Let's not forget there are many other facilities. Some we may not know about. Iran is one of the most mountainous countries on earth. And Iran has thousands of scientists. This is a country with, what, 4th, 5th highest IQ in the world. So I don't think anyone can eliminate the nuclear program. But the hope here is that maybe eventually at least the Americans and the Iranians sit down and negotiate something via intermediaries. The Turks are helping, the Saudis are helping. 21 countries, including all regional powers, came up with a statement the other week saying there's going to be no winner in this.
But do you really think, though, that we can still walk it back from where we are currently? Because they've already said words, right, that they want to, take out or assassinate the Ayatollah. These are, I don't know how Iran's going to take that.
Well, from my understanding is all sides, these are systematic states, meaning we're not talking about fight between militia forces that you decapitate the leadership and it's over. Look at Iran, for instance. It reconstituted its forces quite quickly, even though despite the tactical success of the other side initially. So you're talking about like a 90 million strong country. So I think they have all contingencies in place to make sure the state institutions stay in place. Every side has a contingency in this.
They're talking about regime change even.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's not in interest of all regional states, right? I mean, look at when we had civil war in Afghanistan, Pakistan suffered, all regional states suffered. When Iraq, there was a civil war, Syria, the same thing. I imagine Iran is 4 times larger than Iraq's population back in 2003.
Can we talk about how China can be drawn into the conflict, being the #1 buyer of Iranian oil?
Well, I mean, obviously the Chinese are very worried.
And sorry, which means also that it's not in Iran's interest to sabotage the Strait of Hormuz, right?
Yes, so as we speak, for instance, there are Chinese surveillance ships in the area. Some reports suggest that maybe as we speak, China is already helping Iran in terms of surveillance. Some were saying maybe Iran is already using Beidou, the GPS system of China. We don't know. China has so far condemned all of these attacks as violation of international law. But at the same time, I think they're also hoping that there'll be a diplomatic de-escalation. Now, that's what I'm saying. Well, the last time we saw, remember the Houthis in Yemen, who were seen as an ally of Iran, when they targeted shipping lanes, China was also affected at some point. Now, I don't know if over time there was a negotiation. I think China understands that if it becomes a desperate situation, it's going to be really out of their control, because they don't control also Iran, right? The same way Russia doesn't control Iran. But it's just interesting, as we speak, Vladimir Putin, who oversaw invasion of Ukraine in violation of international law, is positioning himself as a mediator and potential peacemaker. This is the crazy situation we're finding ourselves in. As we speak, China could lose in the short run because they rely on Iranian oil, and of course, if the Hormuz Strait is closed down. But I think over the long run, this could benefit China if this gets out of control, because that means Russia is bogged down in Ukraine, U.S. is bogged down in the Middle East, and China will have a more or less free reign here. That's why I think if you're Filipino, it's your interest not only to see our folks are protected, not only to see our gas prices doesn't get out of control, not only to make sure more civilians are not going to suffer, but a U.S. that is bogged down in a bigger war even in the Middle East, while Russia is also bogged down. That means China will be the inevitable, like a superpower with a free reign. And as we speak, actually, China is flipping the script, right? Suddenly, they're now positioning themselves. They say, obviously, we don't agree as Filipinos because we're being bullied in West Philippine Sea. But their rhetoric is, look at us. Have we invaded any
never
country?
invaded.
How many countries we have invaded in the last 60 years? Of course, we can talk about the Vietnam border war, etc. But they say, look at other countries. They have disagreements. They go and strike each other's facilities, right? So suddenly now China is looking like the pacifist response. Again, this is all propaganda and positioning. But my fear is that as a Filipino, it will be harder for us to get sympathy of other ASEAN countries on the West Philippine Sea issue when, in fact, you go to Malaysia and Indonesia, everyone is paying attention to what's happening in the Middle East.
Because we're pro-America? Is that why?
Yeah, well, did we condemn any of America's? I don't think so, right? And there's this sense that, this is no longer about international law. It's tribalism, right? If our guy did this, we'll support that guy. So I think in that situation, China has a natural advantage, right? Because they can offer economic investments. They can offer technology.
But Richard, that's my question. Should the Philippines take a position here? We do know the U.S. is our longtime ally. We also have special ties with Israel. But you have nations condemning it. There are also others who support it. For our own national and foreign interests, should we take a side?
Well, maybe for the first time in a long time, I'll agree with Sara Duterte, who for the first time in 3 years made a statement on West Philippine Sea.
Yes, actually.
Something along the lines, like ngayon lang siya nag-statement, something along the lines of somewhere in the gitna dapat ang Pilipinas, because we have to protect our OFWs, right? And we don't want to be caught in the crossfire. But the devil is in the details, right? What does sa gitna mean? And that doesn't also mean that medyo magtulog-tulugan tayo sa West Philippine Sea. That's why I said, China actually it has an interest in seeing other superpowers bogged down somewhere else. Remember, it's not like U.S. has infinite resources. In fact, as we speak, one of the biggest critics of Trump's intervention are MAGA people, Make America Great Again people. And
because
that's what he promised.
No war, but why? Because they're saying our real competition is China, right? Our real interest is to remain the superpower in the most important region in the world. That's our region, right? And our real interest is to avoid another quagmire.
Well, now in a way, they're somehow abdicating to China in that regard, because China has made inroads in making friends in Africa, Latin America.
Here in the ASEAN.
The Latin America and Africa, we have seen that for a long time.
And then US aid, wala na.
Wala nang US. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you are an American diplomat right now, if you're a US ally who wants to push a certain vision in our part of the world, East Asia and the Pacific, you're going to have a much harder time
Tayo
right
na
now.
lang atang kaibigan nila.
US? Well,
Si Netanyahu.
well, actually, you know, the lesson we should learn from all of the U.S. allies who are in the middle of conflict right now is, have you noticed they're getting billions of dollars of aid? In fact, Ukraine is not even a U.S. treaty ally. And they got $60 billion in aid.
Tapos
How
ang
much are
mga
we getting?
tayo, mga bulok na, ay, hindi naman.
I mean, hindi naman.
Mga medyo pinaglumaan na, hindi naman bulok.
Let's just say it's nowhere close to what Ukraine or top U.S. allies in the Middle East are getting. So I think the lesson for the Philippines is, you know, a smart ally makes the most out of its alliance. And last time I checked, we are in the most important region of the world, with all due respect to those traditional
Pero tama
theaters.
ka, yung sabi ni Sara Duterte is, yung relationship natin with China is not limited to yung issue natin sa West Philippine Sea, nung sinabi niya. It goes beyond that, di ba?
Tama naman.
And her dad, of course, famously kind of pivoted towards China. Do you think this could actually be something that Sarah could campaign on?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if things get really crazy, God forbid, right? They can say, not only we don't want to be next Ukraine, we don't want to be the next, I don't know, ex-US ally My point here is, if you look at actually these conflicts, the lesson is very clear. You negotiate for peace when you're in a relative position of strength, right? Whatever country you are. So actually, where I disagree with Sara Duterte is like, yes, tama, dapat play, hindi naman play safe, but play smart and hedge, but let's pursue peace with China, but not when we have such a weak military or such a divided country. Let's deal with China when we're a much more unified country, not uniteam level, but a stronger military.
That's a long way off militarily.
Ukraine was a joke militarily in 2021, and that's why in 2022 it got invaded. Today, Ukraine is, by some experts estimate, the most seasoned and effective armed forces in terms of marines, but also drone power. So in 3 years, Ukraine went from fourth world to a drone superpower. Look at the operations they undertook in Russia, the Spiderwebs operation. So what I'm saying is that you don't need war to accelerate. But we can see that there could be war, or we could be invaded, or something crazy could happen if we don't step up. Because the Taiwanese are stepping up, the Japanese are stepping up, even the Aussies, who are not on the front line, are stepping up by going for AUKUS submarines. So I am with Sarah on the general positioning, strategy, diplomacy, but I am with President BBM and others in terms of strengthening the foundations of our power by leveraging our alliances. And that's why foreign policy is difficult, because you have to always adjust to shifting ground. The ground is shifting as we speak.
Oh, we went back na to the country and forgot the conflict in the Middle East.
Because they're all related, right?
That's true. That's true.
China, US, Russia, they're all involved in every major region, and we are the most important region, and we're at the front line. So that's why this is not only the usual concern we have dun sa gitnang silangan, dapat titignan din natin ang epekto nito dun sa calculus ng China sa ating karagatan, sa ating backyard.
Okay, maraming salamat sa'yo.
Thank you. I mean, you introduced me as a geopolitical analyst, so that's why I gave you the full...
It's but right. Thank you so much, Professor Richard Heydarian.
Thank you so much.
Our resident geopolitical analyst.